You're listening to Feathers, a podcast of stories about God speaking and his people having just enough faith to believe him and obey. I hope these stories inspire you and encourage you to take flight in your own faith. I'm your host, Amy Bennett, and this is Season 4, Episode 10. Well, hey friends, and welcome to this week's episode of Feathers. I am so glad that you're here. I wanted to start out this week and just say a thank you to Lynn Meisner, Jamie Trung, Marie Cherry, and Tammy Walker for sharing last week's episode of Feathers with Sarah Perry. It was such a great episode, and if you didn't get a chance to check that out, I hope you get to take a little bit of time and do that. It was so encouraging, especially to you moms out there. This week, we have Kelly McCorkle Parkison. She is a native of South Carolina and currently resides in Tennessee. She's a mass communications cum laude graduate from North Greenville University. She held the title of Miss South Carolina 2002, earned top 15 at Miss America, and placed third on the CBS reality show Amazing Race Season 7. She is now a pastor's wife and mom to 5 kids, as well as the founder of the Loft 218 organization, a ministry to orphans, widows, and sex trafficking victims in India. And it's going to be really exciting. Her story actually starts on the reality show, so that's going to be a new one, being able to hear a story that starts there. I think you're going to really like Kelly. So let's go ahead and get started with Kelly. Hey, Kelly, and welcome to Feathers today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. I would love for you to introduce yourself and your family.
Well, my name is Kelly McCorkle Parkison, and I'm married to Scott Parkison, and we have 5 awesome children: Seth, who is 9, Levi, who is 7, Lila, who is 7, and Katie Pierce, who is 4, and Joel, who is 3.
Yes, and we will be talking about your children quite a bit today. Before, I just had to tell you, we have some connections that I don't think you knew that we have. It was kind of funny. I got an email requesting that we would connect for the podcast, and she mentioned that you were a former Miss South Carolina. Is that right?
Yes, 2002.
Yes. Yep. So we have that connection. I actually am in Fort Mill, just below Charlotte.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I've been to Fort Mill.
Yep. And then I found out, I actually was talking to somebody at church, Lacey Thomas, and she's adopting from India, and she actually is in some kind of Facebook group with you.
Yes. That's neat. Small world.
I know, totally small world. And then she even told me that she had found out that you knew our pastor, Jay Hardwick.
Yes, we went to school together at North Greenville University.
Yes. So it's so crazy how we have those connections.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed your book. You have a book, and it's going to detail out, or it does detail out, kind of your story. And it's just a beautiful story of adoption and faith and all kind of stuff. And it really starts out with another fun fact about you is that you were on The Amazing Race.
Yes. In 2005, it aired on television.
Yes, and about that time, I was a reality TV sort of junkie, but that was one show I did not get into. My really good friend, Danny, hey Danny, she loves that show, so I know she'll be excited to hear this.
Yeah, it's I really wasn't into reality television that much, but this show just really caught my eye because I guess I'm a competitive person by nature. And just the thrill of traveling across the world, which I had never done, just also drew me in. And I've always been interested in other cultures and had just never been anywhere. And so that show, I guess, was kind of my way to see the world. So I just loved watching it. And as I watched it, I would always be like, I could totally be on this show.
That's what my friend Danny says. She wants her and her husband to go on there.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, let me just close down Facebook here so we don't keep hearing that beep. So your story actually that we're going to talk about today really kind of starts on The Amazing Race. And so I would love for you to even just jump in and talk about what The Amazing Race has to do with your story and take us from there where you guys are today.
Sure. Well, I was on The Amazing Race. We actually filmed the show in the very late guess it was November, December of 2004. And The Amazing Race was really my first time out of the United States. And just as the show is titled Amazing, it was an amazing experience. It really changed my life in a major way. First off, leaving the United States and just being exposed to other cultures and how people live all over the world, and also just being challenged as a person, and just learned a lot about my character and things that I'm good at and things that I needed to work on and improve as well. So it was just an incredible experience just for me personally. But one of the things spiritually that really impacted me was just seeing the poverty across the world. And I know that we have poverty in the United States, and I always am really careful to explain this, because I never want people to think I'm criticizing our country or that I don't see the needs in our own country as important. But really, the poorest of the poor here in America are wealthy compared to a lot of the poor across the world. And so seeing that poverty in other countries just really just challenged my focus, made me realize how I take for granted just a lot of simple things like electricity and hot water for showers and a family, even food, cars. I mean, just everything that I've taken for granted most of my life. So God just really, on that whole trip, really just opened my eyes and my heart up really for the importance of missions, and really just the world that I had just kind of closed, I guess, my worldview all those years. Not that I had never done community service, and I always had been taught and cared for others, but he just really opened my worldview on that trip. And we went to 11 different countries, and each country was awesome, had its own different experience, own different culture, just all the different things that we did. And when I came home from filming The Amazing Race, I talked with my parents about it, and I told them, I said, I loved every place we went. I'm so glad that I did it. But there's one place that I will never go back, and that was the country of India. And just as the saying goes, never say never, because just a short time later, I was contacted by one of my professors at North Greenville University. I'd already finished school, but they were going to take a mass communications trip, and that was my major, mass communications. And they were going to take a trip over, basically to do a lot of storytelling and videos for what Christians had done in India after the tsunami hit in 2004. And I was really just unsure if I wanted to go, because I just remember the culture shock that I experienced when I was there on The Amazing Race. Not that the country is bad or anything. The culture is just so different that I went into major shock. And the poverty there was much worse than any other country we had been in so far. And so that also kind of put me in an uneasy place. So,
yeah, and didn't you talk about a little bit in the book? It's just, I imagine it as a big sensory overload. I mean, you talk even about the smell too.
Yes. Whenever we take people now, that's the one thing I'm always saying is your senses are going to be on overload, because I mean, it's everything from the noises. I think it's against the law there if you don't honk your horn, because they are always honking horns, and it is always loud anytime you're on the street. And even like when you're in your hotel, you can hear the horns outside. And then just the smells, the sights, and then a lot of their culture just being different. I just went into major shock. And so I just decided that was a one-time experience for me and good for me to experience, but just didn't picture myself going back. And so then when my professor called, I just really had to pray about it, because I was scared, really. I was just scared to go back and feel all of those same things again. But the Lord just really kept working on my heart, and I knew that I was supposed to go. And as I continued to see stories on the news just about the tsunami and the effects that it had on the country of India, I just knew that the Lord was telling me to go. So I went back almost a year later, about the same time that we filmed The Amazing Race. And I don't know if it's because I was going with a different lens this time, whereas, like the first time I went, I was on the race and it was my first time experience. And I was also really focused on winning a competition. But this time I really was focused on serving the people. And my heart just really changed for the country. I really began to see just how beautiful the country is, how beautiful the people are. I began to appreciate the differences in our culture, and I really just fell in love. And because we were doing so much tsunami relief and efforts there, I held a lot of orphans. A lot of children lost their parents due to the horrific storm. And so I held a lot of orphans in my arms and loved on them. And there are so many stories that I have from all the different orphanages that we visited across India. But it was one of the very last places that we visited. And it was a particular family. This wasn't an orphanage, but it was a particular family. They were Indian, but they had actually, the husband had grown up in America, and he had this successful job and just out in California, and suddenly felt like the Lord was telling him to move back to California and minister to his own people in India. And so he married and met this wonderful wife, and they just had a heart to make a difference. And so they adopted 15 girls and raised them as their
15?
own. 15 girls, yes.
From India.
From India.
Like in India.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. And so they were raising them as their own. They also had 2 of their own biological children. So they had 17 children total. But they just really treated these girls like their own daughters. And it just really made me appreciate the picture of the gospel and adoption that's talked about in the Bible. And then when the husband and wife went on to explain about why they chose to adopt girls, because I had asked them that question, like, why girls, why not boys and girls? And that's really when I first learned about sex trafficking. And, so this was, like 11 years ago, and was just really beginning to learn about, not that boys aren't also involved in trafficking, but just the high rate of females, and also just in the culture of India, girls, just their success rate is so much worse than a boy who lives on a street. A boy can survive, a boy can get skills, a boy can pretty much make a living for himself, but girls are just not quite as valued over there as boys, and so they would have a much harder time trying to survive on their own. And so that's why they wanted to adopt girls. And so their story just really impacted me. And as I listened and learned about each of the 15 girls' stories, I just remember very clearly just a call from the Lord. And I was a single lady at that time, that one day I was going to adopt from India, and I was going to adopt a little girl. And I even joked with the Lord about that, because I thought, all right, Lord, you got to handle the husband part first, and
take it step by step, please.
And little did I know that at the time, while I was gone on that trip, my husband was actually asking my parents for permission to marry me, and so I actually came home from that trip, and he proposed soon after. And so one neat thing is my husband is adopted. He's adopted domestically. He's from Mississippi and was adopted in Mississippi. And he had a wonderful adoption experience. He and his sister both adopted, and
they're adopted from birth?
Yes. And they both felt like their parents always made them feel special because they were chosen. They never felt different, or, they just always felt very special, and their parents almost made them feel more special, I guess, than a family that had biological children, because they were chosen and sought after. And that just always gave my husband what I think the confidence that he needed growing up, And
Mm-hmm.
So when I came home from the trip and shared with him that I felt like the Lord was telling me to adopt, he was all for it, because he had a great adoption experience, but it wasn't something that he really didn't know how serious I was about it. And he also, we were just getting engaged, and there was so much just happening in that point in life that we just kind of both knew it was something that was out there, but we really didn't discuss it deeply until time went on. So after we were married, shortly after we were married, we found out a few months later that we were expecting our first child, which was a big surprise. And then we soon after he was born was pregnant again with our second son. And it was about that time, I guess, we started really discussing it shortly after Levi was born, and probably even before he was born, while I was still pregnant with him, my second son. We just started discussing adoption more and more. And my husband just told me I should start looking into it, just finding out the information. And so I just quickly jumped online, was trying to find any information about Indian adoptions, and I really did not find a lot of information, at least for adoptions from India. And what I did find, though, was that India had a stipulation that you had to be married 5 years before you could adopt. So that just, gave us a time frame of what we needed to wait for. And I just continued to pray, and so did my husband, just about that situation. And this is all kind of documented in the book, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. But when we got closer to the time of being able to adopt after that 5-year mark, my husband really only wanted 3 children, and I wanted 3 or more children, but I wanted to be able to have another child and adopt. So I wanted 4 children, and he just wasn't sure. He was like, I say we just have a third child, and we either, have one or we adopt one. And so it was just really a time of growth for me, because we weren't on the same page, and I was confused, just because I felt like the Lord had called me to do this, but I also still had that deep desire to have another child if I could. And basically, just through a year of just praying and different things that took place, the Lord really did work on my heart, first off, to realize that I can't control things. And because I was sort of starting to get bitter a little bit that my husband wasn't on the same page as me. And I'm married to a wonderful, godly man, and I should be so thankful that I have somebody who reads the Bible every day and leads our family in a spiritual way. But I was just getting kind of bent out of shape because I wasn't getting my way. And,
Yeah, and it's actually interesting. I'll just interject here. That it doesn't always happen that way, just for anybody that's, because I hear this a lot, that a lot of times the female, the wife wants children, and the husband has to come along, type thing. But I just want to share, for us, I was feeling the same thing. Like, I really, really wanted a son. We had 2 girls, and I really wanted a son. And my husband was like, "Oh gosh, like, I don't feel like we're supposed to have another child." But it ended up for us that we ended up adopting a son. And so it was sort of like a blend. In our case, it was sort of like a blend, and we adopted at 8 years old.
Oh, wow.
So we didn't have another baby, which is what my husband was concerned about, but we did get the son, which is what my desire was. So Anyway, I just think it's interesting how God works it out different ways and meets the desire. So anyway, just keep going with your story. Sorry to interject.
No, that's great, because it is true. I hear it a lot too. Usually the wife kind of has the feeling and the husband, but I have heard it the other way too, where the husband's really wanting to and the wife is not. So I guess it goes both ways. But anyways, I had just a really spiritual moment where I realized I just had to give that desire over to the Lord. And I basically just said, all right, Lord, I'm very content with what you've given me and the family that we have. And I just love my husband so much, and I'm, want to do whatever he wants to do. And like the next day, the Lord worked in my husband, and just really, my husband just felt like God showed him that the desire that I had to adopt was a spiritual desire, and that as the spiritual leader of our family, that he should help me in that and promote that in my life, if that's something that that the Lord was doing in me. And so pretty much from that day on, we just moved forward quickly with the adoption, and we also soon got pregnant with our first daughter, Katie Pierce, and started the process to India. And it was just an incredible process, and just how the Lord kind of worked all kinds of different pieces of things together, and how we found our home study agent and our adoption agent. And
you guys had medical stuff too that you guys
yes, that
had to go through.
That came through soon after. We didn't know it all at this time, but and we also didn't realize, I guess, how difficult India was going to be. I think I just had these high hopes that everything was going to be smooth and it was going to be fast and we were going to get her sooner than anybody else's adoption I had heard about. Um, but our process just had a lot of ups and downs. And so, I mean, really almost a year later was the first time that we got a referral for our daughter. And we really didn't think we were going to get to have her because of her medical issues. She had a severe heart defect, which it was basically just a severe heart murmur. And she needed a surgery to repair that murmur and she could have a long, healthy, full life. But, you know, in India, they just can't afford those surgeries or they're not interested in doing that for an orphan. And so we had to kind of really struggle to figure out how we were going to get her that surgery because at the time, our health insurance said they would not cover the procedure because it was a pre-existing condition. And so we were really just struggling and thinking we were not going to be able to get her as our daughter. And then just the Lord provided this wonderful man who we have still never met to this day, but he lives in Knoxville. He's a pediatric surgeon, and he actually found us a doctor in India and paid for her procedure to be done.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, so the Lord just really blessed us with that friend who's a stranger, but he's actually really not. He's a brother in Christ, and we still keep in touch with him today, just kind of letting him know how she's doing and just always letting him know how much we appreciate him. But so our adoption process was just really full of a lot of ups and downs with her medical issues. Also, when we got to the end of our process, we were actually denied our daughter by the Indian government. And that was really tough to hear because we were so close to the end, and then suddenly we're told that she could not be ours with really no legitimate reason. And that was just tough. That was probably my weakest moment spiritually. I just felt like I didn't have any more strength, and I just felt like just lost, I guess, because I just felt like we were trying to do everything for the Lord, and that wasn't working out. And it was hard. You know, it's really hard to explain to someone. And I guess you could probably relate is, you know, even though your child is not with you in your house and you've never met this child, but you are so in love with this child and you know this child is yours.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just was willing to fight for her and do anything for her like I would any of my other children. And it was just really hard to think that she was going to be taken away. And we ended up, you know, fighting the government, and we did get her, and we finally did get to adopt her, and we got her heart procedure. And
so what year was it that you guys adopted?
We brought her home in 2013.
Okay. Wow. So this is like 11 years?
Yeah.
No.
Well, let's see. No, 5.
Let's see, 9? I can't count.
Let's see.
A long time after you first
8
heard.
years.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. So it's been a long time coming, but now that she's here and been with us 2.5 years, it's like she's been here all along. And she's just a little Parkison, and we're so blessed to have her. And it was just an incredible journey. It really just taught me so much spiritually, and I really just saw what I believe is the heart of God. I read so much in Scripture just about the caring of orphans and the oppressed and the less fortunate and widows and the needy. And I just feel like I really saw his heart through this whole process and how much he really cares for us, and really how I was an orphan and he's my father, and he brought me into the family and rescued me and adopted me. And spiritually, I just have never matched any other experience to adoption that's really just shown me the heart of God.
Mm-hmm. And you guys, you said you had a 5th child, right?
Yeah, we got pregnant again during our process. And that was a big shock and surprise because we really just were, you know, kind of had our plan that we were going to have the 4. And the Lord surprised us with our number 5, our little Joel. And so he was actually born before Lila ever came home too. He was born May of 2013, and then we actually met her for the first time in September of 2013 and came home in October.
Wow. So you guys had 2 children while you were in the process of adopting.
Yes.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What is the verse about many arrows? Something.
Yes, the quiver full.
Yeah, quiver full. All right. So you guys, I think that's just amazing how God took you on that journey from never saying you would never even go back to the country to organizing that trip and moving your heart and all that. So I think it's just a beautiful story, but I don't think that's even all of your story, right? So you guys are doing even more work in India. Is that true?
We are. During our process, I was actually doing a Bible study in Nehemiah and just really felt like the Lord was speaking to me again and just telling me that He wanted us to do more than just adopt, but that He had more for us. And that was really scary for me to hear at first because, I was a mom at that time. I had the 3, and I didn't know Joel was coming, but I knew Lila was coming, and I thought, well, I'm about to be a mom of 4, and I'm a pastor's wife, and, I feel so overwhelmed sometimes as it is, Lord, what are you asking me to do that's more? And as I just continued to pray, God just made it clear about His heart for the orphan, and so I knew that we were supposed to do something for orphans, and as I continued to pray more, I just felt more and more drawn to the stories and the things that I'd heard about women and children that have been involved in sex trafficking, and also just felt drawn to serve and love widows, and had learned just about widows, and their care in India is not very great, and they're often considered cursed as well. And so they're usually shunned from their communities. And so the Lord was just opening my heart really for the least of these in India. And my husband and I, we took a long time both just to really pray about what the Lord was wanting us to do. Were we supposed to help people adopt? Was I supposed to become an adoption agent? Was I supposed to do home studies? I mean, we just looked into all kinds of things. And what we really just felt like the Lord was telling us is that He wanted us basically to start a ministry in India to help orphans and the least of these. And through our process, once we actually went over to India and got Lila, and we were able to tour her orphanage, which I write about in the book, He Knows Her Name, it was a very bittersweet thing for me because, one, I was very thankful that she was there, and just hearing her story of how she came to arrive at the orphanage, I just felt like the Lord's hand was all in it. And I was thankful that her physical needs were met, that she was fed food, and, that I think she was generally safe there. But she really lacked nurture. So when we actually went to get her, and she was 4.5 years old, she did not even know how to walk.
Wow.
And so, there was just no stimulation of her brain, no emotional love. I had to teach her how to play with dolls. Just so many things, that we just naturally do in our homes, as families that just children miss out on in some of these orphanages across the world. And so that's why go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that's one interesting thing about adopting that I found is that a lot of people, when they think about adopting, they think it's going to be really difficult situations. And I absolutely believe that there's really difficult situations when, children are, I can't think of the right word, but when they're out of control and they're just feeling that pain so deeply. But a lot of it is just teaching them very, very basic things. And that's the things that the children that are not in stable homes miss out on are very, very basic things.
Just how to self-regulate and how to even meet strangers, just all of those sort of things.
Oh, yeah. Social cues is a huge thing.
Yes.
Yep.
So through that experience and after seeing her orphanage, we just realized that we wanted to build an orphanage that really focused in on a family unit. And so we have started a nonprofit, and it's called Loft 218. And Loft is an acronym for the least of these, because those are the people that we're going to be servicing. And 218 comes from Nehemiah 2:18, because that was the Bible study that I was doing at the time. And If you know much about Nehemiah, the Lord just really broke his heart for his people and rebuilding the wall. And obviously, the Lord has just really broken my heart for the Indian people and rebuilding lives and hearts there. So in that particular scripture, Nehemiah basically tells everybody what the Lord has called them to do. And then they say, let us rise up and build and prepare our hands for the good works. And so that's what that scripture is about, is letting us rise up and build and preparing. And so our plan right now, we've just been in a major fundraising phase, and we are trying to purchase land. And we've actually seen several properties over there that we really like. And I just got home, I guess about a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago from there, and I saw several pieces of land, one in particular that I really like, and it's pretty affordable. And so I'm just really hoping that the Lord will continue to provide funds, which has just been another amazing thing, is to watch him provide for this ministry that we really have not done a lot of marketing and promotion for, other than just like the people who know us. And then the Lord really provided the opportunity for us to tell our story in the book, He Knows Her Name, which is not something I ever dreamed that I would do, is write a book, because I have learning disabilities and really struggle with writing. But I really felt like the Lord was telling me to do it. And all the proceeds from the book go to help us with our ministry at Loft 218. But our plan is to soon purchase land and build an orphanage over there. We want to start with the orphanage, and we really want to design it in a way where there's family units within one orphanage, so that a small group of kids can have a feel of what it's like to have a parent, versus having, hundreds of children with, a few adults that are supervising. Not that that's bad. I'm really glad that there are people out there that are serving and doing that. But the Lord just really struck us with that after seeing our daughter's orphanage, that we really just want to provide a family atmosphere for these children. Mm-hmm. And then we next want to move on to doing a shelter for women, and women that would like to be rescued and changing their lives from the trafficking life that they've been brought into, and then continue to grow from there, and seeing what we can do for the widows and the others that are the least of these there.
Wow. So that's a lot. I'm sitting here thinking like, wow, you're raising 5 kids and then doing all this in overseas ministries. That's just amazing. I have to ask, just spiritually speaking, how do you persevere through all of this?
Yeah.
Is there any verse or anything that, encourages you?
Well, I just say, like, there's a lot of verses that I have to cling to in all of this. And I question myself daily, like, how am I going to do all this? How do I do all this? And I question the Lord. Sometimes I'm really good about trying to tell the Lord what I think needs to happen. And so, I question the Lord, but He has really given me a lot of freedom in this. My nature is to do things quickly and to get it done fast. And there's just no way that something like this can be accomplished quickly, because I guess he could if it was in his time, but I can't do something like this that fast overseas. And the Lord has just given me a lot of freedom in this whole ministry, is just to realize that it's all going to happen in His time. He is providing the funds, and that also, because I feel like it's moving slowly, although some parts of it are moving quickly. He gets all the glory, because I don't really do anything. I just sit and wait on Him to basically lead each step. And so there's so many verses with that. I'm pretty sure it's in Psalm, where it might even be in Proverbs, but I think it's in Psalm, where he talks about, the Lord, or the man has a plan in his mind, but the Lord directs his steps. And that's just kind of what I feel like the Lord's been doing here. And then I always think of James, don't just be hearers of the word, but doers. And so, I'm reading all this scripture all the time, just about thinking of others, serving others, loving the least of these. And so that's the thing I always remember, is I don't want to just sit and listen and take that in. I have to actively be doing what the word says to do as well. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, just, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, because I definitely don't understand what it takes to build an orphanage that, is in India, in another country. And so when I can just rely on Him for that, he definitely directs my paths and gives me the strength that I need.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's just so encouraging. I just, see the picture of you just being a conduit for what God wants to do. Like, just, as they say, being the hands and feet.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing. That is so encouraging. If people want to check out this book or follow along with your story, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Well, we have a website, and it's under my name. It's kellymccorkleparkison.com. But the book is on Amazon, and it's called He Knows Her Name. It's also in Lifeway stores and Barnes & Noble. And I think there's some other online sites that also have it as well. But we would love for you just to read our story and just see what the Lord has for you. I tell people, our story in the He Knows Her Name is a lot about our adoption, but I also really feel like a lot of it, kind of like the underlying theme, is doing uncomfortable things that Jesus asked you to do.
Mm-hmm, and, absolutely.
Yeah. He will ask us to do things, to step out and to be obedient. And in the book, you can see my struggle with that. Like, do I do this? Do I not? Do I do this? Do I not? And I've really found that even when it seems hard, you're always blessed. And, like I said, I would not trade being able to just have that closer relationship with the Lord and really just seeing his heart, just for the orphan and adoption, which includes me, includes you, includes anybody who's in the family of Christ. And, so I would love just to connect with you personally. If you have questions about adoption or, anything like that, just feel free to contact me through the website, and I'd love to chat with you and talk with you. I'd love to come and share at churches and women's events, and talk about a ton of different things, whether it's, missions, adoption, just growing closer to the Lord, obedience, all those things. But just appreciate your prayers and your support for Loft. Again, the proceeds from the book go to support that. So that would be a big help to us in our ministry.
Yeah, and so Loft, is that they can get to that information from your website as well?
They can. It also has a website, but it's also linked on mine, and it's loft218.org.
Awesome. Well, I am definitely going to look into it. It's been interesting. It's kind of interesting as I've done this podcast that there sometimes tends to be themes as I, and I just, follow God's leading on organizing and scheduling the episodes. And like you and I talked about at the beginning, it's been a hard time for us to get together over the past months. And it's just so interesting that it's kind of falling into several episodes here that have talked about human trafficking.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. It kind of is one of those things where it's kind of like a light bulb moment. You see God kind of continually bringing something up. So we try to pay attention to that.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm going to check that out for sure.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yep. Thanks a lot. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Kelly. I know I was just so encouraged by her. There's so much I could share from this episode that we can take. Man, like, her life is just such a picture of surrender to Jesus. And I think it's just beautiful how she has surrendered her life to Jesus and how he is using her to build his kingdom, both in her family and outside the doors of her home. The other thing we didn't talk about very much is that she's also a pastor's wife. So they have a local community that they are ministering to as well. And the one thing that I think that I'm going to take away, first of all, is the surrender, how you have to just surrender control to God. That, initially she said no to India, and yet God had something for her. And yet she had to surrender that control and say yes. Also in how many children that they would have. She didn't get to share the entire story. I would encourage you to pick up her book so you can hear it. But her and her husband really went back and forth about how many children to have and how they would come into their family, whether it was by birth or whether it was by adoption, and just to see how, as they surrendered that God was able to begin working between her and her husband, and then see how that worked. And I just love God, how I think he just probably winked at them and say, you guys are considering 3 and I've got 5 for you. So I just think that's so funny, actually. I just love how God works like that. But the other thing that we just need to remember is that when we can surrender control, when we can let go and we can do things in His way and in His timing, that God gets the glory, because it was never our plans. When we can surrender our plans, it's His plans, and then He gets glory because it was His idea. So I just love that. The other thing that I really want to take from this, and that this is really a culmination of a lot of episodes that we've seen, is that you can really tell when someone is surrendered to the Lord, when they are showing their love to others, when it's not just about their life, is that when they're extending love to other people. And I see how she's doing that through her adoption and through the Loft 218 organization that she has created, and just being an answer to the human trafficking problem that we have. It is just so interesting that God continues to bring that up, and it just breaks my heart every time I hear about it, and just love to see that people are on the ground and doing work with that. But yes, that God calls us to love the least of these, and that we are not just to be hearers of the word, but doers. So I do want to encourage you guys, don't just listen to this podcast and, just say it's a pat on the back and you're hearing feel-good stories. Please seek the Lord to see what He would have you do to love people in your life, maybe that you know, or maybe that are on the other side of the world. I can tell you that when we are truly surrendered to the Lord, that He is going to lead us to others, because that is His plan. That's His plan to spread His kingdom, is for us to love God and then to love others. So guys, I hope you were just so encouraged. Make sure that you go share this episode on Facebook. You can leave feedback also on iTunes. That helps as well. Just encourage you to go over to featherspodcast.com and leave a message for Kelly as well. And I think that's it for this week. So guys, thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next week on Feathers.